my sister wanted to name me Michael. And my mom said, no, I think we're going to call him Delbert. She says, you call him Delbert and I'm going to call him Butch. You know, coming from the water department, I think it was interesting, especially going back to 1980 when I started. They were starting the replacement for their people that were there. And the water plant at that time was very labor intensive. A lot of the valves that you operated were hand operated. They weren't operated by electric actuators or pneumatic actuators. The one plant actually had two plants in the same building. One plant was ran, it did have pneumatic actuators, but they were more trouble than what they were worth. So when I started in 1980, there was in that January-February time frame when I was hired, I think there was 15 operators working at the waterworks. So you had 15 operators. They had just gone from a two superintendent operation. They had a plant superintendent and a distribution superintendent. And they had like 5 guys on the distribution and 8 guys as plant operators. And it took a lot of guys to operate that plant. It was just manual intensive, what it did. So during that time, by the time I became superintendent and working on making that more friendly to operate, when I took over in '86, there was 6 of us working there.
So payroll had gone from 15 to 6.
Yeah, to 6. And one superintendent, I was the superintendent, and I had 5 workers. And we changed the operation at that time. We operated during the day and 4 to midnight. And we didn't operate from midnight to 8 in the morning. So the first year, to save some money, to be able to hire somebody, we went to what they call off-peak meters for electricity. So depending on the season, but from 9 o'clock at night till 7 o'clock in the morning, you got a cheaper rate on your electricity. So you wanted to use most of your electricity during that time period, because you could buy it for maybe 7 or 8 cents a kilowatt or 6 cents a kilowatt, compared to 11 to 14 cents a kilowatt during the day. So we completely flip-flopped our operation. Started the plant at 4 o'clock in the afternoon and shut it off at 8 o'clock in the morning. And that first year we saved over $15,000 in electricity fees. And it ran that way up until just a few years ago. I think they still had the midnight to 8 shift, but they're running some during the day. Just, for whatever reason. Maybe I don't know where they're at on their schedule, but so completely flip-flopped the changing of that operation. Plus, we put in electric actuators. We weren't manually changing valves. It was more automated. We had more controlling systems that were measuring what was going on with the water, the chemistry of the water, plus doing it by hand still. But one operator could handle the operation. It didn't take 2 operators on a shift to handle the operation. And then during that time, they had their own backhoe and they were doing some of their own work. We kind of changed that mentality. Instead of having the water operators and the water employees putting in water mains, we hired that done. And also, and I'll give a lot of credit to the water boards we had back then. Water board, if you signed up for a water board, you were on for 6 years, one term, 6 years. So there was some good continuity of water board members. The water department is separate from the city, so you kind of ran your own thing. And during that time, from '86 till into 2000, 2008, we did a lot of work investing in the community and putting in larger mains for better fire protection, more fire hydrants, looping the whole city with a larger main, and actually preparing for growth in the city. So it was interesting when making that transition. So I'm kind of a long story short, but from that transition going to the water to coming to the city at the time was in the red in the general fund. There wasn't much growth. There wasn't much vision what was going next or what was happening next to get that vision going. And then when we went into a place to grow, the water was already there. So all we had to worry about was sewer and roads. So it was interesting to come from that side and to see. Then I got to actually see firsthand some of the fruits of what we've done in years earlier, because of the larger size mains that we put around and some of the improvements that we did. And if you think about that, in 86, 87, they had $1 million in the bank. And $1 million back then was a lot of money. Plus they were getting great interest. Interest rates were fairly high. They were getting good money on return, you know, on their savings or bonds. They were probably getting 8 to 10%. You know, they were getting pretty good money. So they were making some money on those funds. So what we did is we did a capital increase for water rates, and then we spent, every year we were spending anywhere from $250,000 to $500,000 to $750,000 on mains or improvements to the plant every year, with money coming in from the rates to offset that, and also using money from the set-aside fund. And we still maintain, we never dipped into that fund further than down to about $400,000. And then we'd get it back up again and then hit it again. So you didn't do, you know, it may look like you did a project every year, but a lot of times you were just getting over doing a project and you're fixing everything up and getting some of the connections made and doing some of the things like that. But we were under, you know, my motto back then was, if we weren't under construction, we were under destruction. Because at that time the plant and the mains were so old that if you weren't doing something to upgrade them, they were just getting worse. We actually got contacted 5 years ago from the Department of Interior. This portion of the Raccoon River has the Topeka Shiner minnow, which is a favorite food for the walleye. So it's a protected minnow. And so we were looking at doing something with the oxbows out there to actually create a breeding ground for the minnow. When it floods and goes into those oxbows, they lay their eggs, and then they come back out when it floods again. So it's great breeding ground for that. There just wasn't any money in the city's budget to make that a full-blown hatchery type situation. Although the Department of Interior would help design it, they wouldn't put any money towards it. So it kind of stalled. But naturally it's happening without us doing anything.
That's part of your legacy here, is to kind of bringing Perry in the direction of sustainability in several directions. You know? Well,
and hopefully, you know, a lot of times, and I know Jay Patty's always been that way since he's been council member and now mayor. He says he wants to be able to say that he left it better than when he came in.